Okay. Good afternoon to everybody. We will be looking at tools for academic writing and methods of reference. In my last week discussion, I discussed how to write a research proposal. This discussion is purely on technical matters, not about the content, but how you present academic paper. What are the conventions and traditions you should be using when you write an academic paper? So up to this point, we have been discussing content of an academic paper. But this is basically how to present, because today academic writing is something very developed. So there are worldwide recognized conventions, how to write. Even in individual non-English languages like Myanmar. I don't know whether you have a reference manual, prepared in Myanmar language, but it will be a good idea to develop, the manual of style or manual of reference, following very well-known manuals of reference like Chicago and Harvard methods. So here I'm going to discuss with you some basic ideas. Of course, this discussion is not comprehensive. You will have to follow up with more of this kind of style related things. When we write something, we are talking about paragraphs and sections. How to break paragraphs, how to divide the paper into sections. Now, these are pretty basic things. I don't think I need to describe you in detail, but sometimes we can see that even in the research papers, people don't see why there should be paragraphs. Now, what is the criterion of having a paragraph? One reason can be like a very simple reason. If you have something like a whole unbroken, the sheet or something, then, you can't read it. So therefore, you break here and there paragraphs. But how do you do that? What is the reason for breaking a paragraph is important to think. Now, each paragraph has to be discussing one particular aspect. So that is the main idea of a paragraph. It doesn't mean that you must not connect several different things. But if you can have one paragraph for each aspect, then there is a reason when you read, when the reader knows that this paragraph says this. Now in academic writing, you can have also sections, or even what we call parts. Within a part or within a section, you can have paragraphs. It depends on, if you are writing a paper, then within the paper you have paragraphs. Combination of several paragraphs can be a section or part, and then you have the complete essay. If it is a book, if you have parts, within the parts there are chapters. So if you have, say, 12 chapters, you can have like introduction and then, conclusion, but other chapters you can have several different sections or parts. So sections or parts deal with separate items. Within sections or parts, you have paragraphs. So maybe each page has a couple of paragraphs. It depends on. And when we write academic writing, also it is important to have an introduction and conclusion. The purpose of introduction and conclusion is saying at the start what you are going to do and saying at the end what you did. Now, any good academic writing has to have a clear beginning and clear end, okay? And then beginning part we call introduction. Concluding section is the summary of what you did. In between you have what you call your essay. So the essay should, or even a book look like, so you have introduction, and then you have conclusion. So here you have body of the paper or book, whatever. Now, this is the kind of basic structure. In the introduction, you say what you are going to do. And in the conclusion, again you say what you did. Now, this is a very good device, because when you start essay saying, I am going to do this, when you write in the conclusion, I did this, you yourself know whether you did it. Sometimes, people start with to do something, but then they end up in doing something else. Even the author doesn't know what the author did. Because you can be digressing, going here and there. But it is very important to say, this is what I am going to do. And then you do it. And then after doing it, you say, this is what I did. Okay? Now, any academic writing, it is a good practice to have beginning and conclusion. Usually I follow this method. If you read any of my papers, you will see that I start with the introduction, and then I have sections or whatever I do, and then I have the conclusion. Now, within this, I can have sections. Now, if I have sections, in the introduction I say, in this essay there are 2 or 3 or whatever sections. And I say, in the first section I do this. In the second section I do this. In the third section I discuss this. So, that kind of introduction you can give at the beginning. And at the end you can say, this is what I did. It's a repetition, conclusion, but that's okay. Because, then you summarize what you said. And now, one practical use of this is, now today, there are so many books and so many papers. Your life is too short to read all these things. So you want to decide whether you should read that paper or not, whether you should read that book or not. The best thing is you look at the introduction. Introduction says what the paper is about, or introduction says what the book is about. So you just read the introduction. Then you can decide whether you need to read the rest of the thing. Or you will find, no, this is not relevant to me, so you just keep that aside. Because you can't read everything, right? So even in a paper, you say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. Then we can see that, okay, this paper is relevant to me. So you read it. Otherwise, you can keep that aside, okay? So that way it is a practical use, saying what you are going to do. More than that, it is a good thing to be aware, because when you write a paper, you have to have a clear map, clear plan. I remember one of the professors in University of Hawaii who taught us, he gave us this example. He said, it's like you have a problem in your pipe, and then you call a plumber. So plumber will come and examine it and say, okay, this is what is wrong. I will fix this, I will do this. And then he will do it. And then having done it, he will come and say, okay, I put this, I did this. He said it's like, plumber saying at the beginning, okay, this is what he is going to do. And then you do it. And then having done it, you come and say again to the master or lady at home, okay, I removed this, I put this part, this is what I did. So it's a very practical thing. Now, if you read a lot of, actually in You can see this in many American scholars' writings. They start paper like saying, in this paper, I am going to do this. Very clear. No hanky-panky. You just say, in this paper, I am going to argue against this, something like that. Or I am going to establish, or whatever. So you exactly say what you are going to do. And then, okay, if you are not interested in that, you cannot read that paper. That's very easy. Otherwise, sometimes, some papers, some books, you have to read to the end till you know what the book is about. Even after coming to the end, sometimes you can't know what the book is about, what the paper is about. Because, it is so weak. So writing is a very precise thing. Particularly, when you give a speech, you have a beginning and a conclusion, and then the middle. It's exactly like this. But sometimes, people have, sometimes even in the Dhamma sermons, you see that. You just say whatever that comes to your mind. No plan, no aim. You can't write academic papers like that. You have to have a definite plan. So introduction and conclusion, and that is very important. And also, if you think a little bit more carefully, deeper, you can see that when you have introduction, conclusion, and the middle, I always think of what the Buddha said. About the Dhamma, Buddha says, Adi Kalyanam, Majjhe Kalyanam, Paryosana Kalyanam, right? Adi Kalyanam, good at the beginning. Majjhe Kalyanam, good at the middle. Paryosana Kalyanam, good at the end. So the Buddha refers to the practice in the sasana. Beginning is good, and middle is good, conclusion is good. Actually, so it's like academic paper, in a way. You can say in a good academic paper, beginning is good, middle is good, and the conclusion is also good. In the sense, not exactly what the Buddha meant, but you can use what the Buddha said about Dhamma is good at the beginning, Dhamma is good at the middle, and Dhamma is good at the end. Now, actually, if you look at Buddha's sermons, you take a Majjhima Nikaya or Digha Nikaya discourse. How does Buddha start? Buddha says, monks, I am going to say this to you today. And then, that is the introduction, right? And then Buddha does that. And then there is a summary or conclusion. So in order to learn research methodology, you don't need to go out really. You read the discourses. Discourses, you see that there is a clear methodical thing. Now if you look at the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, Buddha says, Dukkha Samudaya Nirodha Magga. But he never confused, right? Start Dukkha, then Samudaya, Nirodha, Magga. Very clear, very methodical, very logical, right? You don't start with Samudaya Satya and you then go to Magga and then you come to Nirodha. No. There is a fixed method. That method has been followed. Okay. So, introduction and conclusion are very important. That's why you have to do these things. Let's look at endnotes and footnotes. Why endnotes and footnotes? Of course, today, all of you are working with computers. This is just a matter of, if you like endnotes, you can put endnotes. If you like footnotes, you can put footnotes. When we were typing with typewriter, I don't think any of you know about that age. It's very difficult because for a footnote, you really have to keep the space. The space doesn't automatically get adjusted in a typewriter. So if you don't do it correctly, you are in trouble. But there were people who did that very well, those days. You are very good at typewriter. But then computer does the job for us. But why endnotes or footnotes? Now, very often now, when you get an invitation to write a paper to a journal, they will send you a little document on style. They will say, use footnotes. Or some people say use endnotes. They give a specific thing. But for me, I usually prefer to have footnotes, because when I am reading, if I want to know something about it, then write. Particularly if you are reading something in the computer, going to endnotes is a little bit difficult, because you have to go to the end of the document and look at the endnote. But if it's a footnote, then it is easier. So I prefer footnote. But sometimes they ask us to put endnotes. Then of course we have to do that. But today of course it's no big deal. Instead of footnote command, you put the endnote command. So that's all. But some people say that when you have footnotes, your attention is drawn to some other things. So they prefer endnotes, because if you want, you go to endnotes, but many people don't go to endnotes. So you can just forget it. But for academic reading, I think for us, footnote is better, because we care about the reference. We don't want to know where the information coming from. So it is much easier to have footnotes than endnotes. But anyhow, it is a personal preference. If you like footnotes, you can use footnotes. If you like endnotes, you can use endnotes. Now the more important thing is, what should you use, endnotes or footnotes? What do you include as endnotes or footnotes? Now endnotes or footnote, you can use a reference. You can put the reference, okay, I got this information from such and such a book. Or some information that is not as important as to include in the main body of the paper, but nevertheless relevant. Or you put endnote or footnote some additional information. Now the question is, what should we put in the footnote is the important thing. Usually your reference is either in the footnote or endnote. That's the very important. If you take something from a book, Majjhima Nikaya, you have to say Majjhima Nikaya, which part, which sutra, and things like that. So you give that information. Apart from that, we say that you give a footnote, something that is relevant, but not directly relevant to your discussion. So if you put something not directly relevant to your paper inside, then of course reader will get confused. So what you do is, you put that information as a footnote. It has to be relevant, but not 100% directly relevant. Or some additional information relevant. Sometimes we say something not very important to be put in the article or paper. So you put it as a footnote. So putting as a footnote has a different meaning. If your name is mentioned only as a footnote, that means you are not being taken very seriously, right? Because your name is only in the footnote. It is not in the main body. That meaning is also there. Right? Suppose you want to mention somebody's book, but you put a footnote. But then that can be understood as, okay, it is not so important to discuss in the paper. It just got a footnote from you. So footnote has that kind of derogatory meaning also. But basically why we put footnotes, to reference, that's necessary, or we give some additional information which are relevant. Sometimes, people have very, very long footnotes. Again, I don't like that very much, because, sometimes some European scholars, we say that jokingly, they have footnotes for footnotes. Something like that. But then, actually footnotes and endnotes are, you can give us kind of, okay, you are writing something very, very important. So more you have footnotes or endnotes, more your article become important. But that's not exactly the same. You can have some footnotes or endnotes, but don't think that you have to have so many footnotes or endnotes. Because if your article is good, well argued, whether you have less footnotes or more footnotes, doesn't really matter, okay? Because some younger scholars have this tendency to put as many footnotes as possible. But that's not very important, okay? But if you need some information to be given, of course you have a footnote. So footnotes and endnotes are very important. You can use whatever you like, depending on, But if you are writing to a journal or something, you have to follow their instructions. But if you are publishing your own book, you can use whether it is footnotes or endnotes. Now, very often in the books, they put endnotes because they think that, long endnotes, if you want, you can look at, otherwise you can just forget about it or something. That's the idea. So, when you read the academic book, look at the endnotes, look at the footnotes, look at what they have put as endnotes or footnotes. Particularly this thing came because today in the modern scholarship, we always give reference. Those ancient days, we didn't give any reference to anything, we just wrote. So, you take from Majjhima Nikaya, you take from Digha Nikaya, you take from this and that, but you never mention where you take it. But today, it is different. We like to know where you took it. And then if you are a good scholar, then, writer says, this is page 59, Majjhima Nikaya. Then if you are a good scholar, you should get the Majjhima Nikaya and see whether 59 it is there. Okay? You must check. Because otherwise, if that person has taken from some other book, that person also has taken from some other book, it's wrong. So you can really check. Okay? I will come to that point again later. So for these purposes, we use endnotes and footnotes. But in today's writing, actually, these things are much easier because when you use the computer, you just... And then we talk about the quotations. Now, quotation is a very, very important thing in academic writing. The first question is, why quoting? Why do we have to use quoting? Now, these are the reasons. Of course, not all the reasons here. To indicate that the particular statement or particular information or particular fact belongs to someone else, and not to claim undue or undeserved for credit. Give credit or blame to whom it is due. To recognize an author. To preserve intellectual honesty and integrity. To enhance credibility of what you say. To indicate that you have seen and consulted the original author's work. Now, these are some of the purposes. Why do you quote? Now, the number one is to indicate that the particular statement or information or fact belongs to someone else, not to claim undue or undeserved for credit. Now, when you quote from somebody else. Why do you have to quote? Why do you have to quote? Means you say you took it from somebody else. Why do you have to do that? One reason is whenever you get a particular statement, information, fact, you say that you took it from that particular source. Now, by doing that, what you do is you do not claim undue or undeserved for credit, because that information was collected by somebody else. So, if you do not quote it, if you do not refer to the original author, then of course you are using somebody else's information. And then you are depriving that person of the credit of doing that research or getting that information. So, in fact, the very important thing in quoting is you do not claim undue or undeserved for credit. And then the next one, give credit or blame to whom it is due. Now, when you quote, actually what you do is you show that it is not yours, okay? You show that it is not yours. You show that it belongs to somebody else. Now, there are two things. One good thing is you give the credit to that person. You give the honor to that person. The other negative thing is this. If that other person has done something wrong or given wrong information, then you are not responsible. That's a very important. You are not responsible. You say that you got it from so and so. Now, when you say you got it from so and so, you are not intellectually responsible for that. So, if there is a mistake, it belongs to that person, not to you. So, either you give blame or you give credit, either way, to the other person, okay? Not only you give credit to the other person, you also don't take the blame, for whatever the mistakes that the other author has done. So this is something very important to recognize an author. Now remember, whenever you are quoting from some author, you are really recognizing that author, giving a recognition to that author, right? If I am writing something and if I quote from your book, then I am giving a recognition to you, right? Everybody reading my paper will know about you as an author. So I am recognizing you. Sometimes, people do, even they want to recognize their friends. So they mention their friends' books. But it's okay if the friend's book is a good book or good important thing. Otherwise, don't mention your friends' names in your books. But by mentioning it, you are giving a credit to that person, okay? So that is very important. So the moment you refer to somebody and quote from somebody, you are recognizing an author. And also to preserve the intellectual honesty and integrity. What is that? That's very important. To preserve the intellectual honesty and integrity. That means, simple language, you don't steal things from others. So every time you quote, refer to the author, you are saying that I am not the one who did this. But bad thing is, sometimes people do this. They don't quote, they don't refer to the original author, they put this information as if that person discovered. Then what? It is a stealing. It is a cheating. It is being not honest. Now, stealing is very bad, as you know. And for the Buddhist monks, that adinadana can cause parajika. But of course, during the Buddha's time, there was no this problem. So parajika doesn't include stealing from the books, okay? But don't do that. Although Upasampada Bhikkhu will not be parajika by, the stealing some material from a book. But, that is not good. Because, if you get from somebody else, then you are stealing somebody's thing. And then you are getting the credit for someone else did. So therefore, this preserving intellectual honesty and integrity is a very, very important thing in academic writing. You don't get, the things from other people. And to enhance the credibility of what you say. And then also, when you quote something, you enhance the credibility of what you say. You say something, and then you quote from an author, recognized author. Then you can support what you say with reference to some author. So it enhances credibility of what you say. To indicate that you have seen and consulted the original author's work. Now that is another important thing. Whenever you quote from somebody, you indicate that you have seen the original book. Again, people can do misbehave here. Like you have never seen the original, but you look at somebody else's book, that author has quoted from the original, you take that quotation and you put it as you saw it. But the issue is, if the other author has got the wrong information, then your information is also wrong. Then what happens is, for the thing that other person did, you are also getting blamed. So, intellectually it is not honest to indicate if you did not see a book, you must never quote directly from that or indicate that you are quoting directly from it. What you can do is, you can say, according to such and such author, then you put it. Then what happens is, you don't take the responsibility, right? You don't take the responsibility, you give the responsibility to the other author. So whether it is right or wrong, you are not responsible. If it is right, credit goes to that person. If it is wrong, blame goes to that person. You don't have to worry. But you always say according to such and such author. Suppose you want to quote from Majjhima Nikaya, but you have never consulted the Majjhima Nikaya, you look from other secondary source. but never say according to Majjhima Nikaya. Always say according to that author in the Majjhima Nikaya, this is found. Then you are giving the responsibility to that author. So, this quoting is a very, very serious thing, because every time you quote, you are getting it from somebody, and, the praise and blame, credit and blame are involved, and also your honesty and your integrity. So, quoting is something very the important aspect in academic writing, because you quote in order to get the support. To support your thesis. Or you quote from, if you want to know about the population, if you want to know about the crimes, if you want to know about many other things, you have to quote. Like, if I want to know about how many monks are in Burma, how many Samaneras, how many Upasampadas, I will have to get that information from the statistics department in this country, right? Then if I say there are 500,000 monks altogether, I have to give the source. I have to say I get the information from a statistical book from the department. Then, if those numbers are incorrect, I am not responsible for it. Because I say clearly where I got it from. If the information is wrong, you have to blame the statistics department and not the author. So that way, you are safe. You are safe because you are not claiming. You never went out and counted how many monks are in the country. So somebody else counted it. So you use that information. But you have to mention where you get the information. So, that is not really quoting, but of course that is to refer to, give the source of the information, from which source did you get that information. Now, again, you have to be careful. What are the sources you are going to use? If you want to know how many monks are there in this country, you go to the government bureau and get the information. That's a reliable source. But can you just ask from somebody and say that so and so says how many monks are? That's not reliable, right? So then you have to know what is the reliable source of information and what is not the reliable source of information, okay? Particularly in those things, you have to get the reliable source of information. So that's also is very important, okay? So basically, while quoting, we quote in order to achieve these things. How not to quote? How not to quote? Quoting out of context. Quoting out of context means you are quoting in irrelevant manner. What you are quoting is not relevant. But what you do is, sometimes people do that again with the wrong intention. You want to get the support of a great author. But then, this author doesn't support your position directly. So what you do is, you get a quotation from that author, leaving aside certain parts that you don't want, only taking the part that is advantageous to you. So you are quoting out of context. If you quote the complete sentence or complete paragraph, it says something else. But if you take half, then of course it can be taken as supporting your conclusion. So that is quoting out of context, quoting something not relevant. And if you are quoting out of context, you can always say that this author in a different context says this. Sometime in the academic writing you find it. But then you directly say that this is said in a different context, but I am using it for this context. So when you say that clearly, then the reader understands the limits of that. But sometimes what happens is people quote only what is advantageous to them. Okay? That happens quite often. You can give a misleading idea about the person. I hear this story one time when some kind of great politician came to country. When the politicians, big prime ministers, president come to the country, newspaper people go and ask a lot of questions, and then next day they report these things in the newspapers. So when this president came to the country, one newspaperman asked a lot of questions. One newspaperman asked, what do you think about the nude bars in this country? Then president asked, are there nude bars in this country? Okay. Next day, that newspaper reports like this. The very first question he asked after landing was whether there are nude bars in this country. No one. Of course, it is true. It is the very first question he asked. But why did he ask that question? Because he asked that question in response to the reporter's question, right? But then you don't mention the reporter's question. You just say, very first question he asked is about the nude bars in this country. Now that is quoting out of context. Because you don't put the first part of the question. You put only the second part. So when you get the second part, yes, that is the first question he asked. But he didn't ask about the nude bars. He was surprised. That's why he asked, are there such bars in this country? So you can see that, quoting out of context. So you must not do that. In academic writing also, sometimes we quote only the part advantageous to us. We leave behind the other part. That is wrong. Quoting to give a wrong, unintended impression by the original author, or quoting to show off. Number 2, quoting to show off means you just quote from different books just to show that you know so much. But that is not relevant. But even if it is not relevant, sometimes people quote from big authors. But to show off. So that is not to pretend that you have read so many books and things like that. So the showing off is not a good thing. Also give an unintended impression by the original author. Quoting something that you have not seen, you have not read, you have not consulted. Quoting from a secondary source. I referred to this earlier also. Now if you have not seen a source, you must never quote it as if you have seen it. Okay? In order to quote as if you have seen it, you must have seen it. But if you just look at the secondary source and it says that Majjhima Nikaya says this, and you take it from that book and says Majjhima Nikaya says this, you can't do that. You can say, according to this author, Majjhima Nikaya has this. Then you are safe and you are honest. But otherwise, you want to pretend that you read the Majjhima Nikaya, but you have not read. You have got the information from some other book. Right? But then you will have a question. Okay, you read the book and it says Majjhima Nikaya says this. And then you go to Majjhima Nikaya and you see whether it is there. You find that it is there. Then, of course, you don't even have to refer to the secondary author because you have seen it now yourself. Then it becomes your information. So remember that very carefully, because very often we get information from secondary sources. Secondary sources, Majjhima Nikaya says this. But then, if you go to Majjhima Nikaya, if you read it for yourself, then it becomes your information. Then you can quote it as you are quoting first hand. Sometimes, you can cheat and you are not getting caught, because what you say, Majjhima Nikaya has this according to secondary author, of course it has it, and so you are no problem. But it is being honesty or dishonest. So in academic writing also we have to be very honest, right? Then what you need to do. But on the other hand, what I am trying to tell you is this: you can't find information without the secondary sources. You need to get the help of secondary sources. But what you get from the secondary sources become your own information when you yourself read the primary sources. So getting a clue from other author is no problem, okay? That's no problem. But you have to make it yourself. Make it your own information by looking at what the secondary author saw that. I mean, we always get knowledge by reading others. The other day I talked about literature survey. Now literature survey, when you read one paper and then you go to the bibliography of that paper, and then get the bibliography of that paper, and you go to those books. And then again, in other, go to new books. In those new books, you look at the bibliography, and you go to those things. But once you do that, at some time, you start rotating around the same set of articles. Yeah, that's what happens. Which means, basically, you know what is going on. But how did you get that information? You get that information from others. But when you yourself check each of those things, it becomes part of your knowledge. Do you understand? Do you see what I'm saying? So, without help of other writers, without reading other papers, you can't get the information. So you have to rely on them. That's how we get information. However, you have to check it. Every time you see a reference, check whether it is true or not. That's very important. And in my own experience, and your experience also, you will find sometimes those references are wrong. So if you did not check it, then you are also putting the wrong reference. Don't do that. So that's why quoting to give a wrong impression, quoting something that you have not seen, not read, not consulted, quoting from a secondary source. But if you really want to quote, then what you need to do is you can say according to such and such, so and so. Then you are not taking responsibility. You are giving the credit to the other person, and also possibly blame also to the other person. If it is not there, you are not blamed. But the bad thing is, then the reader knows that this man has not seen the original. Now you say that according to so and so, Majjhima Nikaya, Alagadupama Sutta has this. Okay, you are honest, but the reader knows that you have not seen Alagadupama Sutta yourself, which is not very good, right? Then the best thing is, you read the Alagadupama Sutta, then you don't need to refer to the secondary author. You can directly say, according to Alagadupama Sutta, it is there, right? So that's how you make that information. Quoting too much, poor style and intellectually compromising. Sometimes, people quote pages and pages and pages. How can you do that? You are getting so much from other people. No, actually, if ever you want to say something about other person's writing, you read it and you summarize. And maybe you quote a small paragraph just to show that you saw it. But you can't just quote like several pages or something. Actually, if you are quoting more than one paragraph, you have to explain that. Sometimes, very rarely, authors do that. But before quoting long, they say that I am quoting this completely because of these reasons. You know that quoting like that is not very good, but you have to quote it completely. Then you say that I am quoting it at length because of these reasons. Otherwise, you only summarize the other person's arguments, summarize what the other person says, and then you maybe quote a small paragraph. Quoting without properly connecting the quoted passage to the content of your paper, both above and below. Now, this is another very common weakness. Very often people just quote from others, but you don't say anything about the quotation. You just quote. But no, you can't do like that. Before quoting, you have to say, I'm quoting from such and such an author in order to prove this. And then having quoted, you also have to say how it is connected. So you can't have a quotation just hanging. You have to make the quotation connected to your writing before quoting and after quoting, okay? So you just can't have quotation and let the quotation speak for itself. No, you have to explain the quotation. You have to summarize the quotation, okay? So you can't just, so if you quote properly, without properly connecting the quoted passage to the content of the paper, both below and above and below, that's not a, so that is how not to quote. How to quote? Technical aspects. You can quote words, You can quote phrases, you can quote sentences, you can quote paragraphs. Use of quotation marks, inverted commas for words, phrases and sentences. Using indent for paragraphs without quotation marks. Now you can quote words, phrases, sentences. Every time you quote a word, phrase or sentence, you put these. These are called inverted commas. However, if you want to quote a paragraph, now we don't use these marks. What you do is, suppose your document is like this, then you have, okay, this is your quotation. This quotation simply you indent. So if you indent, then you don't have to put quotation marks. Okay. So when you just indent, people know that that is a quoted passage. You don't need, but usually we don't quote indent one sentence. Okay. If it is just a one sentence, very often we just include in the body of the writing. If it is more than two sentences, little longer, several lines only. Okay. Simply we don't use to indent just one sentence. Of course, sentence can be very long. If it is a long, that's a different thing. Sometimes some people, sentence like this thick. Then of course, even one sentence you can quote. But if a sentence is like 10, 12 words, you don't need to indent it. You just put within the essay itself. But otherwise, you indent. Now, this part is again, you can see that very technical. Today, indenting, quoting in that manner is a very technical thing. Computer will do the job for you. But apart from paragraph, the other things you usually inverted commas. Using indent for paragraphs without quotation marks. So this is how usually you do the quoting. So these are basically technical issues. The quoted word, phrase, etc. have to be exactly the same way as they were in the original, even if they were grammatically not correct or incorrect information. Now, this is something very important. When you quote something, you can't correct, okay? You can't correct other people. You have to quote it as it is. Even spelling, simple spelling mistake, maybe yes. But even spellings, you have to be careful because we have today American English spelling and English spelling. So if you are following English spelling, COLOR, color will be wrong to you. But if the original author has used COLOR, you can make it COLOUR, okay? You can't change it. Although it is according to you. But if it is a simple spelling mistakes like, you have THAT that, but you have TAHT or something. That maybe you can correct. But apart from that, you can't correct. You can't improve. Okay, that's very important. Not only that, suppose inside the quotation, you have something italicized. Italics, slanted words. You can't make it straight. Okay? Italics have to be italics. Bold have to be bold. Not only that, when you, in a paragraph, if you have bold or italics, very often we say bold is original. Italics is original. Why? Sometimes the reader will think this italics is not the original author, but you are putting italics. So if the italics is from the original writing, you have to say italics is original. On the other hand, even within the quote, if you want to put something in bold, you can bold it and say bold is mine. Within brackets, you say bold is mine. Or you can say bold is added. Something like that. Some people say bold is mine. That means writers. Or you can say bold is added. Italics is added. So you can't make any change. So particularly today, if you are using bold, if you are using italics, if it is original, you have to say within brackets, italics is original. Or for this we use the word emphasis. We say like this. Emphasis is original. That means within the quotation you have emphasis. Now emphasis means what? Either bold or italics. Bold or italics both go under the emphasis. Okay, so you can use simply this word and say emphasis is original, or you can say emphasis is added. What is emphasis is added? That means you introduce emphasis. It is not in the original. Now, if there is no originally, the original work, no emphasis, if you emphasis is what happened, you remember when we were talking about logical fallacies, we had some logical fallacy. If we emphasize some word unduly, then you are giving a wrong impression. We say, we must not tell our friends false. We say, but if you emphasize our, we must not tell our friends false. That means we can tell other people's false. So you give a wrong impression about it. So you have to be specifically saying, So in a quoted word or phrase, etc., have to be exactly the same way as they were in the original, even if they were grammatically not correct or incorrect information. In order to indicate that a word is wrong or you do not approve of it, usually the Latin word sic is sic, meaning so, thus. In italics is used in square brackets, like sic. You use this way. Sometimes people do this also. Now, what is the meaning of this? Okay, you say that, you quote something, it says, Buddha was born 6th century AC. Of course, he was born 6th century BC, right? If you say AC, you can't correct it to be BC, okay? So what you can simply do it, you can put this after that. Square brackets, SIC, but this has to be SIC, italics, okay? So you put like this. Then that means you notice that it is wrong. But if not, what happens is the reader will think you got it wrong. Original author put it right, but you have got it wrong. So every time you quote a passage, you have to be careful. If it has a wrong information, you have to indicate that you identify it as a wrong information. Otherwise, what happens is readers will think that you put it wrong. So, quoting is something to be done very carefully. So, in order to indicate this, you put the word sic. SIC is sic, Latin meaning is so or thus. Spelling mistake may be corrected, but in English, American and English spelling cannot be changed according to your preference. A simple minor thing can be corrected, but of course, American or English type of spelling you can't correct, you can't change the language. So the quotation is something very carefully you have to do because you are quoting somebody's statement or writing, so you can't meddle with somebody's writing. Then what is plagiarism? Ideas, concepts, views, words, phrases or sentences, pictures, maps, charts, graphs, etc. are plagiarized. Or even whole works are plagiarized. Plagiarizing means you steal somebody else's thing. That is again plagiarizing. You present as if yours, the material belongs to somebody else, okay? So plagiarizing is basically stealing from somebody else. You can steal ideas, you can steal concepts, views, words, phrases or sentences, or pictures, maps, charts, graphs, etc. Now today it is very important, even a chart or map or draft or anything, whatever you mention, you use, you have to say what the origin is. If it is a picture, you have to say who took the picture, right? Otherwise, you have to say picture is mine, or you have to give the credit. So, this the commercial aspect has developed so much. Particularly if you are putting these things in a book to be sold, you are getting money, then of course you have to pay the money to get that. But for academic purposes, you don't need to give money for quotations and things like that, even for information. But otherwise, for those things, you have to pay money in order to get the right to use that information. Because information is money today. Yeah, Now, particularly it becomes important, suppose, a person goes to the Antarctica, North Pole or South Pole, or get some information. I mean, it's so difficult, so expensive. So then how can others just use it like they are? So you have to give credit or pay to the original author for the labor, for the intellectual labor. So, that is very important. So the plagiarism means it can be ideas, concepts. So now even the whole works are plagiarized. Sometimes, people steal other people's books and publish in their name. Suppose there is this very elderly person who wrote a book and who could not publish, he died. Then somebody grabs the copy and publish in his or her own name. That type of thing happen very often, So you are plagiarizing. Now plagiarizing is something, again, stealing. Honesty and truthfulness are very important virtues in academic discipline. So the honesty and truthfulness, again, are very, very important. In academic writing also, honesty is a very important thing. You have to be very honest. Plagiarizing means you are stealing from others. In the examinations, people plagiarize. But not only that, in publishing, in material, the articles, books, how to make use of existing knowledge without being guilty of plagiarism. Now that is a very important thing. But on the other hand, can we make every information we are using by ourselves? No. We have to rely on other people. Now in that, we have to make a distinction between what is specific knowledge and what is the general knowledge. Now general knowledge you can use without referring to anybody, okay? But any specific knowledge you cannot. Now for example, you are writing about Mount Everest. I mean, how tall it is and things like that, everybody knows now. You don't have to refer to any book or anything. But if you are referring to any specific information about any specific glacier or something like that, then you have to put that information where you got that. But the general information is perfectly okay, because any subject has general information. Now if you want to write the life of the Buddha, there is so much general information. Everybody knows. So you make use of that. So sometimes people misunderstand this. Sometimes people think that for every single sentence you have to put the reference. No, you don't have to. Because there is no point of doing that. We already use existing information, existing knowledge. Now any new information, any new thing today can be general knowledge another 10, 12, 15 years. Then you can use that. That also is. When somebody climbed the Mount Everest for the first time, everything was new. But now it is after 50 years or something. Even the books, I think, I'm not sure, different countries may have different rules. But when a book has been published and more than 40 years or 50 years, anybody can publish that. It's not intellectual property anymore, according to some conventions. But I am not sure. Okay, very. Now, say for example, if you want to make an edition of some tika, you don't need to make the permission from anybody. You can edit the tika because it doesn't belong to any person, right? So like that. So there are certain things with certain time period, it becomes general knowledge. Okay, it becomes general knowledge. And then also there are some certain things like pictures and stuff, there are free sources. So you can mention the free source. Okay, you got it from the free source. Then you don't need the copyright. Otherwise, many things have copyright people, so they have to get their permission. So how to make use of the existing knowledge without being guilty of plagiarism? So existing knowledge can be used. But any specific knowledge, any specific concept, any specific thing has to be, given the due credit. Now, in the commercial ventures, businesses, sometimes for an advertisement, they have one like phrase, like 2 words. Those 2 words cannot be used by anybody else because that's a commercially created concept. So people have a copyright for that. Everybody and anybody can't use it. Suppose there are different types of toothpaste. So in order to sell your toothpaste, you have this one catchy word, 2 words. Your rival company cannot use that because this concept is yours. So this is how concepts also can be sold. 2 word, 3 word, beautifully coined. So that's a product. They use the word product. So that product, company may have paid this man so much money. So anybody else can't use that. So the concept. Now you put a name to your company. Other people can't use the same name. If you say Coca-Cola, can anybody else use that term? No. Because that's a trade name that has been registered. Anybody else can't use it. So like that, phrases, concept. In academic disciplines also, you get similar things. Now we have to use the existing knowledge. There is no need to reinvent the wheel. Now what is the meaning of this reinvent the wheel? What is that? Now this is an English term. It means that if something has already been done, you don't need to do it again. It's a wastage of time and money and energy. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. That means wheel has been invented, so you better use it. So the idea is that you don't have to redo it because somebody has already done it. So you can use the existing knowledge. General and common knowledge is common property of all. For specific knowledge, we have to give credit. So in any subject, what is general, what is common, is common for everybody. However, it takes time for some particular information to be common. After some time, it becomes general information. But until it becomes general information, you have to get the credit. So, this is plagiarism. How to avoid plagiarism? Okay, then we will go to other things like inverted commas, and things like that. But maybe we take a short break before that. Okay. We will look at some of these very basic things: inverted single comma, inverted double comma, brackets, round brackets, and square brackets. I don't know the name of it. Inverted single comma is used to indicate a word or a phrase, not its meaning. Like man has 3 letters. Now inverted single comma is used in order to indicate that we are talking about the word. Now if you say man has 3 letters, what does it mean? Are you talking about the man or are we talking about the word man? When you say man has 3 letters, what does it mean? What are we talking about? Man or the word man? The word man. So when you say man has 3 letters, but to indicate that, what you do is you just write man like this. Now, this shows that you are talking about the word, not the man himself. Like, so indicate that we are talking about the word, we are using just single comma. Or sometimes we use the single comma for a word just to indicate that it is not our word. Now, we say something like, we can say, he said the man is great. Now, what it means is, he said the man is great. Now, that means you are not saying the man is great. You are saying he said the man is great. So, you are specifically pinpointing the word used by the other person. Okay? You are not identifying with it. You don't take it that way. Something like that. You are kind of distancing yourself from that. So, for that what you do is, you separate it from by inverted comma. Inverted double comma to indicate quoted word, clause or sentence. If you have inverted double commas, you are quoting a word. If you are quoting it, or the phrase or clause, sentence, then you are using inverted double commas. Round brackets, which is also called parentheses, is used to indicate an extra word, clause or a sentence within a sentence as a parenthesis. Parentheses or round brackets is to, like when you are talking about something, in a sentence you have like this and then you have something like this again. So, here this is a parenthesis. Maybe some kind of indicate an extra word, clause or sentence within a sentence as a parenthesis. So, this is what you are using. And then square bracket to indicate information not properly belong to the sentence or quotation. Suppose you are quoting somebody. When you are quoting somebody, your quotation can go like this, right? It goes like this. But in here, you may have. Now, this means that the word within the quotation, but this word doesn't belong to the quotation. Okay? Maybe you could be saying something about it or whatever. But indicate that, this doesn't belong to the quotation. So, the difference between parentheses or round brackets and square bracket is less connected to the main thing you are saying. So, it's a little bit external. Okay? But the round bracket or parenthesis is something little different. Larger square brackets are used to include what is within square brackets. Now, say for example, you can have something like this. You are writing a sentence and you have something like this, and then you are writing and then you have something like this. Okay? And then including all these things, you can have, you include both these things within another one. Okay? That is what it is. Sometime in logic we say P, O, Q, O, R. So, here we have like this, and then you can have V, O, Q, O, R, and then you have only alone this. So, both are included within a larger one. So, something like that. So, what I am saying is you have to be using these marks carefully, and also look at them how they are used in the sentences. As I said earlier, you don't have in a quoted passage, you don't use these marks like inverted commas. Sometimes, people use inverted commas to the heading, theme, but no need. You are not using. So, make sure that you are not using these things, particularly commas, inverted commas, unnecessarily. Okay? Because the modern trend is to use them as less as possible. So, particularly in the theme, you are not using inverted commas. And then in a book, you indicate the book by italics, right? You don't put inverted commas. However, in a book, if you have an article, then of course you are using inverted commas. I will come to that later. So these are pretty basic, some technical points you are using, but actually you have to use a manual of style in order to know these things. I mean, what I am saying is in a very brief thing, okay? Now, tools for academic writings continued. Modern Language Association method, MLAO, Chicago method of reference. Now, Chicago method of reference is, again, when you are putting the reference or bibliography. So, the bibliography or reference, you are using author's last name, author's first name and initials or middle name, title of the book, additional information about the book, volume, etc., place of publication and publisher and the date. Date means not exactly the date, but year. So you have, this sequence. So this is what is called Chicago method. Actually, this is the method used by many. Although we have Harvard method is, they say used by graduate students usually. But, Chicago method is the one used by scholars very often. So important thing is whether you are using Harvard method or Chicago method, you have to be using one method without mixing up. That's the most important thing. So be consistent in whatever method you are using. Just don't change it. So within one paper or within one book, you can't be using too many methods. But whatever the method you are using, sometimes, the established authors have their own ways of doing that. But that's okay, so long as they are consistent. But people like you, studying and coming to the academic world, don't try to be independent, just follow our method. The best thing is follow the method. So here in the Chicago method, the bibliography or reference, you have author's last name, author's first name and initials or middle name, title of the book. Now, what is the difference between bibliography and reference? Bibliography usually found at the end of a book. Now, it refers to the biblio means book in Latin. So, bibliography means the list of books. Now, when you put a bibliography usually about a subject, you have to be a comprehensive list of books, whether you use those things or not. But today in the academic writings, again, people just use, even under bibliography, they used. But usually in a bibliography, you mention the books you used. But the issue is, if in your bibliography some very important document is missing, you can't say that you did not use it, because there are some books or some papers in certain subjects, everybody must have seen them. They are so important. So if you missing those things in your bibliography, then your bibliography is a weak bibliography. So therefore it is important to have all the necessary references, all the necessary books within your bibliography. However, when you say reference, it's a little bit restricted. You can say the works you have referred to, or works again that are relevant. These are pretty elastic, okay? But sometimes people say works cited. When you say works cited, you are definitely saying that you are putting only the works you have mentioned. So if you say works cited, you are putting only the works you are used, works cited. And then reference is what you referred to. Bibliography is what is relevant to the whole subject, which is very broad. Sometimes people use further reading. Further reading means, in addition to what you wrote, you can suggest 1 or 2 books to read. So that is further reading. But further reading is usually available only in the textbooks. Otherwise, you don't need to put further reading. But sometimes people use works cited, sometimes people use reference. However, bibliography usually appears at the end of a paper or at the end of a book. Now, when you put reference or bibliography, usually Chicago method is this. Now, example for Chicago method. Allen Thomas B., Vanishing Wildlife, Washington, D.C., National Geographic Society, 1974. Now, here the last name of the author is Allen. First name and middle name is Thomas B. And then the name of the book is Vanishing Wildlife. Now, here you see indicating the book by italics. Every time you refer to a book mentioned in the book bibliography, necessarily it has to be in italics. Then the place of publication, Washington, D.C., publisher, National Geographic Society, and then the year. So this is basically the Chicago method. Okay. Now if you look at carefully, look at where the full stop or period, where it is the comma. Now if you say Allen, after the last name you have a comma. Thomas B., then you have a period. Okay, full stop. And then Vanishing Wildlife, the name of the book, after that you have again a period. Then Washington, D.C., after Washington, D.C., D.C. of course abbreviations, then you have colon, okay, 2 dots, colon. National Geographic Society, comma, 1974, again, dot, period. Now, it is very important to follow this method exactly like that. Where the comma is, you have to have comma. Where the full stop is, you have to have full stop. Okay? So, at the end of every bibliography note, you have to have a dot. You have to have a period. Usually for bibliography, page numbers are not given. For reference, page numbers may be given at the end. For example, P234 or PP. PP means pages. Single P means page. PP means pages. 2342, 23254. And then again you have usually in the bibliography that appears at the end of the book, you don't have year, the page numbers you don't mention. Reference you mention page numbers. Please note how comma, period and colon have been used in the example. For reference, the year may be given after the author's names. So even in the Chicago method, you can give the author's, the year after the author's name. For notes, now notes means what you put as footnote or endnote. Allen Thomas B., Vanishing Wildlife. Then you put within brackets Washington, D.C., National Geographic Society, 1974. Just then you have PP 315316. Okay. So this is usually you are using it for notes. Notes are usually used in humanities studies. Studies. Author date method within the body of the writing is used social and natural sciences. Is called in-text citation. In-text citation means that means author date method. Smith saving time 320, that means the saving time is the book. Smith is the author 320. Then we have author date method. We have Smith 2016 315 316 or Smith and Fisher 2016 122 or P122. Either you can have 122 or you can say P122. This author date method is actually used by social scientists and natural scientists in science, but also today author date method is used by sometimes I myself use this because it is very easy, because you just can say Pope and then you say 1954 page 30. That means the Pope is the author 1954 is the year, and then you say page 30. Either you put 30 or you say P30, it doesn't matter. Like here, you give the, now how do you know what is Pope's 1954? For that you go to the bibliography. Bibliography is usually put in alphabetical order. Under P, you have Pope 1954. Suppose this same author has Pope 1957, Pope 1982. Then you put like this. Oldest, top, next. So it goes like this, okay? So within the body you get Pope 1981, page 20 or whatever. But if you want to know what is Pope 1981, then you come to bibliography and see. Under his name there are these books listed, 3 or 4 or whatever book's name, okay? So that way very basic information is given within the document itself. In order to, if you want to know more, then you go to the bibliography and get to know more. So this is usually. Now this method can be followed even by you when you are writing. It doesn't matter, although it is used by people, basically sociologists and natural scientists, but it doesn't mean that others cannot use it. Then we have American Philosophical Association APA method or Harvard method. Now in that, pretty much similar but some differences. Author's name, last name, first and middle name like before. Year, now in the APA method, you just put the year right after the author. In the Chicago method, you put the year at the end, here after the name of the author. The title of the book in italics, additional information, publisher and the place of publication. So that is different. There place of publication and then the publisher. In this this method, you usually put place of publication. First you can say Sagaing, and then we say Free Press or whatever. Place of publication and the publisher. So it comes. Chicago method, you put the year here, but in the Harvard method, you put the year right after the name of the author. The kind of minor differences, but it is important to follow these different, the methods carefully. Example for the Harvard method. Alan Thomas B. There you see 1974, Vanishing Wildlife, National Geographic Society, Washington, D.C. So it comes the other way. Publisher and the place of publication. In the matters of style, many authors seem to have created their own methods, along with line of these methods. What is important is to be consistent in whatever method you follow. So what is important is actually to be consistent, to consistently follow one method. In journal articles or a chapter of a book article, article chapter is given in inverted commas, and the journal or the book title is given after with or without the editor's names. Example, Jones, Divan Thomas, 2014. Then the article, like the rhinoceros or like it is horn, the problem of Khaggavisana revisited. Now that is the paper. It is published in Buddhist Studies Review, 312, 165, 178 pages. You may use al when there are more than 2 authors. Actually, if there are 2 authors or even 3 authors, we put the author's name. But definitely more than 3 authors, you just put the first author and then you put al. It's again Latin term. Al means and so on. So you put the first author and then, but if it is 2 authors, definitely you mention 2 authors. Even 3 authors, if you can mention, that is fine. But 3 or more than 3, you don't list everybody, you just put AL. Okay. So we have these 2 methods. Now this is what is called MLA, or Chicago method of reference. In fact, I'm sure you are familiar with this because you are using internet. You can get many versions of Chicago method and Harvard method. So look at them. Actually, there are so many ways of putting journal article and encyclopedias, this thing, that thing. I'm not going to list or mention everything here. But whenever you are writing, if you have a problem, then you must consult these things. But otherwise, use common sense. Usually when you have more than one author name, the first author name is putting in alphabetical order, and then first name last and last name first. But other authors we just put as the regular name appears. So those are minor details. And between these 2 things, it is important to know certain important differences and then how to use it. How to use notes. Notes can be used in the long way, like shorter way. Now here you have shortened notes. Smith, save in time, Smith, comma, save in time, comma, 320, and then dot. Author date method is Smith 2016, then the page. Or simply you don't mention the page. Then American Philosophical Association method or Harvard method, same thing. The difference is only basically here, year comes after the author and then the publisher and the place of publication. In Chicago method, place of publication and the publisher. Then the examples for these things. Okay, I think these are some of the basic things in style and reference. I could go on giving you more examples, but that is useless. But if you have any particular difficulty, you must then go to the some version and look at. If you can download the basic PDF of style manual, you can make use of But it is important to be knowledgeable about the basic traditions, and particularly where to put the comma, where to put the full stop are very important. Now I am saying this because sometimes, particularly in the field like Buddhist studies, we are learning such great things like Four Noble Truths and Pratitya Samutpada and those things. People tend to think, what is the meaning of this comma and full stop? Who cares about them? No, even you study Four Noble Truths like great things, commas and full stops are very important. Okay. When you write these things, you have to be carefully observing whatever we study. Okay. So don't think comma and full stop are not important. They are very important. Finally, Buddha says, Anumattesu vajjesu bhayadassavi, right? Anumattesu vajjesu bhayadassavi. You have to see in danger even in the small things. You have to see the danger in not using comma correctly. You have to see danger in not using full stop correctly. Okay, so I will wind up the discussion from here. Do you have any questions or comments? So we will have a discussion.